At 9:17 on the morning of December 7, 1941, Commander Minoru Genda stood on the deck of the carrier Akagi, 230 miles north of Oahu. The second wave of aircraft vanished into the southern sky, engines screaming toward Pearl Harbor. He had spent almost a year crafting this moment, studying, refining, memorizing. Every ship, every gun, every contingency had been calculated. Genda knew America's fleet down to its destroyers. He knew how many planes they had, where they were stationed, and how they would respond. But what he didn't know, what no one in Tokyo truly knew, was the one number that would decide the outcome of the entire war. A number that Japan's entire intelligence system had gotten disastrously wrong. Japan believed that by 1943, the U.S. Navy would have roughly 300,000 sailors. The real number was over 2.3 million. A mistake so vast it guaranteed Japan would lose before the first bomb fell on Pearl Harbor. Commander Genda's brilliance was unquestioned. He could quote fleet strengths from memory, sketch the layout of Pearl Harbor with his eyes closed, and visualize how America would react to a surprise attack. But even the sharpest strategist is powerless if the foundation he stands on is rotten. Japan's estimates of U.S. manpower were based not on facts, but on assumptions shaped by pride, culture, and a dangerous kind of confidence. Tokyo believed that America's Navy operated like Japan's own, lean, elite, and disciplined to the bone. They imagined a mirror image of themselves, an opponent who thought, trained, and fought the same way. They were disastrously wrong. 9 months before Pearl Harbor, a young naval officer named Takeo Yoshikawa arrived in Honolulu under the name Tadashi Morimura. Officially, he was a diplomat. In reality, he was a spy. Yoshikawa had once been a promising aviator until illness grounded him. Now his photographic memory and sharp observation skills served Japan's naval intelligence. He toured Pearl Harbor's waters, memorizing patrol routes, counting ships, studying flight paths. His reports were precise, detailed, and accurate. But the tragedy of Yoshikawa's mission wasn't in what he missed, it was in how his superiors misinterpreted what he found. Tokyo analysts took his ship counts and applied Japanese manning standards to them. If Japan required 1,500 men to run a carrier, they assumed America did too. They had no concept that U.S. carriers often carried 50% more crew, or that America had the population, infrastructure, and training power to expand 10 times faster than Japan ever could. The data was right, the conclusions were wrong. In intelligence work, there's a deadly trap called mirror imaging. It's when you assume your enemy thinks and acts like you do. That was Japan's downfall. They projected their own limitations onto an opponent that had none. The Imperial Navy prided itself on small, elite crews, highly trained professionals forged over years. They avoided mass recruitment, believing discipline and precision mattered more than size. To them, building a navy was an art of perfection, not expansion. They believed America would do the same. They imagined a slow, careful mobilization, a mirror of their own methods. But America didn't build like Japan, it multiplied. In June 1941, the U.S. Navy had 284,000 personnel. 18 months later, that number exceeded 1.6 million. By the end of 1943, it had reached 2.3 million. The curve wasn't linear, it was a rocket. America had factories that built ships faster than Japan could count them, and the people to fill every deck and turret. Japan's planners had never seen anything like it. They weren't fighting a navy, they were fighting an industrial civilization at war. The first hints of disaster came from the waves of the Coral Sea in 1942. Japanese spotters counted to American carriers, nothing unusual. But radio intercepts painted a different picture. Multiple commanders, large support ships, a web of logistics that stretched beyond the horizon. The numbers didn't fit. If there were only 2 carriers, where were all these extra voices coming from? Tokyo brushed it off. The Americans are inefficient, they said. Overstaffed, inexperienced. Then came Midway. The battle that shattered Japan's carrier fleet and their illusions. After the fight, Japanese intelligence recovered a crew list from the sinking USS Yorktown. Over 2,200 names. Their own carriers carried 1,500 at most. That meant 50% more damage control teams, 50% more maintenance, 50% more resilience. And indeed, the Yorktown had survived hours of punishment that would have sunk any Japanese ship within minutes. But Tokyo still didn't correct the math. When American Marines landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, Tokyo expected a small force, perhaps 8,000 men. Instead, over 16,000 troops stormed the beaches, supported by a naval armada that dwarfed Japan's expectations. 3 carriers, a battleship, 14 cruisers, 31 destroyers, and more supply ships than Japan thought even existed in the South Pacific. It was a revelation, a horrifying one. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor himself, was among the first to see the problem. He'd studied in America. He'd seen its factories, its universities, its boundless energy. Now he realized the full weight of what Japan had awakened. He sent a blunt message to Tokyo: the numbers don't add up. Either the Americans had stripped their Atlantic fleets bare, or Japan's intelligence was catastrophically wrong. It was the latter, and Tokyo knew it. They just couldn't admit it. The truth didn't come from a spy or a general. It came from a prisoner. In mid-1943, Japanese forces captured a young American sailor, a radio man from a destroyer, sunk off the Solomon Islands. He was barely 20, scared but talkative. During questioning, he described his training at the Great Lakes Naval Training Station in Illinois. He mentioned casually that 20,000 new sailors train there every month. His interrogators laughed. They thought it was a mistranslation. He repeated it. 20,000 a month, one facility. The officer in charge wrote in disbelief. If true, this would mean America can train nearly 1 million sailors a year. A few weeks later, reports from a German U-boat confirmed the impossible. American destroyer escorts carried twice the crew of Japanese ships of the same size. That was the proof no one could ignore. Tokyo's analysts finally admitted what had been unthinkable. Their estimates were off not by thousands, but by millions. In November 1943, after 6 weeks of analysis, a secret Japanese working group submitted its findings. The conclusion: the U.S. Navy had at least 1.8 million personnel, possibly over 2 million, and the number was still climbing. Every Japanese assumption about American limits was false. The Americans could sustain multiple fleets in multiple oceans. They could lose ships, planes, and men, and come back stronger every time. The report's conclusion was devastating. Japan could not win. Not with courage, not with skill, not even with divine intervention. But the truth was too dangerous. If the fleet knew, morale would collapse. If the government knew, there would be chaos. If the emperor knew, heads would roll. So the report was sealed, distributed to fewer than 20 people, and buried under the highest classification. The war machine continued, powered not by strategy, but by denial. By mid-1944, the truth was undeniable, but it was far too late. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japan sent its last major carrier fleet to stop the advancing Americans. The U.S. responded with 15 carriers, 7 battleships, 21 cruisers, and 69 destroyers, a single task force of 70,000 men. That was nearly 1/5 of Japan's entire navy. When the smoke cleared, Japan had lost 3 carriers, 450 planes, and the last of its elite pilots. America lost 29 aircraft and resumed operations the next day. Japan's admirals finally understood this was not a battle between fleets. It was a battle between systems, between an empire built on pride and a nation built on production. Every Japanese loss was permanent. Every American loss was temporary. That difference decided the war. After the surrender, Japanese officers were questioned by American intelligence teams eager to understand how such massive errors had happened. One of them, Commander Chikataka Nakajima, gave a simple, devastating explanation: our system was not designed to find truth. It was designed to confirm decisions. Intelligence that contradicted existing plans was buried, ignored, or dismissed. Officers who questioned assumptions were ridiculed. Japan's war machine wasn't blind, it had chosen not to see, and the result was inevitable. Japan began the war with about 120,000 naval personnel. By 1945, they had expanded to 300,000, a remarkable achievement for a small island nation. But America's navy had grown from 337,000 to 3.3 million in the same time. That wasn't a gap, it was an abyss. The tragedy of Japan's intelligence failure isn't just in the numbers, it's in the silence that followed. They discovered the truth too late, and even then, they buried it. The math was absolute. Japan couldn't match America's manpower, its factories, or its logistics. The war was lost before the first bomb struck Pearl Harbor, lost in calculations, in arrogance, and in a refusal to believe what the evidence clearly showed. Wars are often remembered for their battles, for the courage and sacrifice of those who fought. But some wars are lost long before the fighting begins, lost to misjudgment, pride, and the fear of facing reality. Japan didn't lose because its sailors lacked courage or its pilots lacked skill. It lost because it fought an enemy it imagined, not the one that truly existed. And in the end, it wasn't bullets or bombs that sealed its fate. It was a number no one wanted to believe.